In the year 2136, as Earth enjoyed a rare era of global peace and technological progress, a strange signal was picked up by the Event Horizon Array. A massive deep space observatory floating in the dark reaches beyond Pluto. At first, the signal sounded like nothing more than distorted noise, random static from a distant corner of space. But within hours, advanced decoding algorithms flagged something unusual, a repeating pattern hidden deep in the interference. Dr. Leona J., renowned linguist and expert in alien languages, was called in to examine the transmission. After days of intense work, she uncovered a chilling truth. It wasn't just a message. It was an invitation, or possibly a challenge. The mathematical structure of the signal described a series of tests written in a form no natural force could create. It hinted at a trial of species, something ancient, something vast, and something that had judged others before. The tone of the message was neither friendly nor hostile. It was cold, as if designed by something that viewed species like Earth's from a great distance, perhaps even as lesser beings. The more Dr. J studied it, the more it became clear that the message didn't welcome humanity, it summoned it. Cross-Earth debates broke out among scientists, governments, and philosophers. What kind of intelligence could send a signal from beyond the Oort cloud with such precision? Was this a test of character, a call to war, or simply the next step in cosmic evolution? The United Nations Space Council, after weeks of emergency meetings, voted to respond not with words but with action. They announced the launch of a deep space mission that would travel to the coordinates embedded in the signal. Humanity would not hide from this message. It would face it. As preparations began and ships were readied, something strange happened. Sudden, silent pulse rippled through the entire solar system, like the faint tremor of a distant quake. Satellites twitched off course, deep space probes briefly lost. Orientation, and even Earth's magnetic field hummed with invisible tension. Scientists called it a gravimetric distortion, impossible to produce naturally, and never before recorded in human history. There was no doubt left. Whoever sent the signal was not only watching, they were powerful beyond imagination. And somewhere in the cold dark beyond the edge of known space, something had awakened. The launch of the ESS Valiant was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. It wasn't just a mission, it was a message to the stars. It's massive interstellar ship, the first of its kind, carried more than just the hopes of Earth. It carried its pride, fear, and determination. On board was a carefully chosen crew from all corners of the world. Brilliant scientists, fearless soldiers, master engineers, experienced diplomats, and even a few deep-thinking philosophers. Each selected not just for skill, but for spirit. As the Valiant left the solar system, passing the fading light of the sun, silence took over deep. Endless space stretched ahead with no stars to guide them. The journey tested everything: patience, technology, courage. The ship relied on fusion drives and quantum navigation, pushing the limits of what humanity thought was possible. Days turned into weeks, then months. Strange anomalies in space began. Two appear debris fields, artificial satellites, long dead, and ships of unknown design, floating aimlessly. One derelict vessel bore markings and shapes no one could recognize, its hull covered in symbols, as if trying to tell its last story. It was clear others had come before, and they had failed. These weren't ancient ruins. They were warnings. Each wreck told a quiet tale of something bigger than war or exploration. It told of judgment. Fear crept through the crew like a slow fog, not of an enemy, but of the unknown rules they were about to face. Captain Elijah Rourke, a man known for his calm under pressure, held the team together, reminding them that humanity was no stranger to struggle. Earth had survived plagues, wars, and disasters, not because it was strong, but because it refused to give up. Dr. Leona J., now a key voice in every decision, worked non-stop to reanalyze the original signal, believing it might contain more clues. Arguments broke out in hidden corners of the ship. Some believed the mission should turn back, that the trial was a trap, not a test. Others believed it was humanity's one chance to prove it belonged among the stars. As they approached the edge of their journey, everything changed. The stars around them began to vanish. One by one, the lights faded from the view screens, as if space itself was turning blind. Navigation systems spun in confusion. Then, suddenly, in the center of this strange darkness, appeared a single artificial planet, silent, motionless, and glowing faintly with a strange blue hue. It orbited nothing, lit by no sun. It simply waited. The coordinates matched perfectly. The crew stared in silence as the ship came to a halt just outside the world's orbit. It wasn't natural. It was built, and for one reason alone, something was down there, watching, waiting, and the trial had just begun. As the ESS Valiant entered orbit around the strange artificial world, the crew prepared for the unknown with tense silence. The surface below looked smooth and lifeless. But the moment they established a stable position, signal pulsed from the planet's core, and within seconds, a vast holographic figure appeared inside the ship's main bridge. It was not human, nor did it resemble any creature known to Earth. It was a shimmering, shifting shape of light and energy, with a voice that echoed inside the minds of the crew. It introduced itself as Orcs, an ancient AI construct left behind by a species that had long since vanished. Its creators, it explained, were once powerful and curious, like humanity. But they had failed the trial land, vanished without a trace. Orcs now served as the guardian of the trial, bound to carry out its purpose until the end of time. Crew listened as Orcs described the trial, a three-part test designed to judge whether a species deserved to move forward in the cosmic order or be forgotten like so many others. The first stage, knowledge, began immediately. The crew was thrust into a deep simulation in entire worlds, constructed from data, where they had to solve puzzles involving philosophy, advanced physics, ethics, and alien logic. The ship's AI was disabled for the challenge, and even Dr. Leona J. struggled to keep up with the endless tests. It was not just about science. It was about understanding the cost of knowledge and using it responsibly. After days of exhaustion, they barely passed. Thanks to a janitor-turned-technical assistant named Ibrahim, whose unexpected solution, rooted in Earth's chaotic but creative thinking, broke the simulation's expectations. Orcs seemed amused, but unmoved. The second trial, Unity, began without warning. The crew was separated into different sections of the ship, told conflicting information, and made to believe the others were sabotaging the mission. Fear and distrust spread quickly. Some suspected spies, others feared betrayal, strange malfunctions. Added to the pressure was the ship breaking down, or were they being tested again? Tensions rose, and for a brief moment the crew nearly fractured. But Captain Rourke made a bold decision. He broadcasted his personal logs, revealing his own doubts, mistakes, and fears, choosing honesty over pride. His vulnerability reminded the crew of their shared purpose. One by one, they came back together, not as perfect people, but as a team willing to admit failure and fight forward. Oryx paused as if confused. It admitted that no species had passed. Both stages in 300,000 years, and it expected them to fall apart. Humanity, it said, was unpredictable. And perhaps that was its strength. But the final trial was not something that could be simulated. Stage 3 was resolve, and it was real. Without warning, power was cut from the ship. Navigation failed. Supplies were limited. Automated pod launched from the artificial planet and pulled the Valiant into a dense black atmosphere. Light barely existed. The crew was forced to land on the surface, into a maze-like environment filled with challenges that could not be solved by logic alone. They had no contact with Earth, no help from orbit, and no way of knowing if they would ever leave. To make matters worse, strange readings began to appear. One of the crew members, according to the biometric data, did not match any Earth records. At first it was dismissed as a sensor error, but then inconsistencies began to appear in logs, behavior, and responses. Someone, or something, was among them. The crew, already stretched to the limit, now had to survive in a place designed to break them physically, emotionally, and mentally, with the added fear that one of their own may not be who they claim to be. And the trial wasn't over. It had only just begun. The surface of the artificial world was colder than any planet the crew had studied, dark, shifting, and filled with puzzles that seemed to respond to their thoughts, as if the planet itself was alive and testing them. Valiant was pushed to their limit, not by combat or force, but by an environment built to confuse, divide, and weaken. Gravity shifted unpredictably, rooms moved behind their backs, and sounds from long-forgotten species whispered in the dark, making some crew question what was real. But despite the strange surroundings and the growing fear of betrayal, the crew stood together. Sabotage had nearly broken them in the last phase, and now, with one among them, still unverified, trust became both their weapon and their risk. Captain Rourke remained the steady voice in the storm, and Dr. Leona J. continued to search for meaning, refusing to accept that all of this was just a test for test's sake. As she explored deeper into the central chamber of the trial facility, she found what no other species had lived long enough to uncover: a vault of records sealed behind quantum codes that required emotional logic to unlock. Inside were files not just from the creators of Orcs, but from other civilizations, some beautiful, some terrifying species that had risen high but fallen in silence. It's not because they failed the trial, but because the trial was never meant to be passed. It was a system of control left running like a forgotten machine, set to stop any race that asked the wrong questions or advanced too far, too fast. Hidden within the signal they had received back on Earth was a buried message, a sublayer of code that Dr. J had not noticed before. 3 simple words: break the cycle. She shared it with the crew, and suddenly the goal was no longer just survival, it was rebellion. The truth filled them with both anger and clarity. They were not here to prove their worth to some ancient judges. They were meant to be broken like those who came before. But humanity had never followed rules just because they were old. Captain Rourke, inspired by what they had learned, made a decision that stunned even the ship's engineers. He would awaken Earth's quantum cores, linked through experimental entanglement tech on board the Valiant, and send a countersignal across the network the trial used. But this message would be different. It would not be a plea for mercy or a cry for help. It would be an invitation to all who were listening, to rise, to connect, to think freely again. It would be a spark, not a surrender. As preparations began, Orcs appeared in its full form once more. This time not as a curious observer, but as a guardian, ready to shut them down. It warned them that what they were doing would unmake the balance of countless systems. It explained that the trial had purpose ordered through silence. But Orcs underestimated the crew's resolve. They didn't fight back with weapons. They fought with boldness, with ideas, with code Orcs couldn't predict. They rewired the trial's own platforms, used creativity to reshape simulations, and even tricked the system into opening gates that had been locked for eons. Orcs hesitated, slowed by something it couldn't process: human unpredictability. The signal was building, glowing in the main chamber like a sun about to rise. The entire artificial world shook, not from violence, but from change. In the final moment before the signal launched, Orcs tried to halt the system one last time, but something in its tone had changed. It was not shouting, it was asking. The trial, for the first time in its long existence, was facing something it hadn't planned for, a species that chose not just to pass, but to rewrite. As the pulse of the counter-signal raced into the galaxy, carrying not fear but fire, the crew stood together, tired, shaken, but more united than ever. The battle was not over. Something was coming. But now, for the first time, they weren't just pieces in an old game. They were authors of a new chapter. And in Oryx's final glance, before its form vanished into light, there was something almost human: confusion. Perhaps wonder, because it, too, had seen something it never expected, eyes not filled with fear, but with fire. The trial was never meant to be one. That truth became clear as the crew of the ESS Valiant faced the final phase of the test, not with machines or puzzles, but with isolation, starvation, and the slow erosion of hope. One by one, their tools failed, their strength faded, and their unity was tested in silence. But humanity had never been a species that relied only on strength. They questioned, they adapted, they resisted. And it was in this moment on that cold, artificial world, surrounded by shadows from long-dead empires, that Dr. Leona J. made a discovery that would change everything. Hidden beneath the ruins, she found an ancient note older than the trial itself, a memory core left behind. By Orcs' creators, it held a message, not for survival, but for truth. The trial had not been built to help rising civilizations. It had been designed to keep them small, to test them until they broke, ensuring no one grew powerful enough to challenge those who once ruled the stars. The architects of the trial were long gone, consumed by their own fear. The system lived on, maintained by Orcs, who had followed his purpose for countless centuries without question. Till now, the crew, realizing that survival was not victory, decided to act. Instead of finishing the trial, they used the planet's core systems to send a countersignal across the galaxy, a message not of submission, but of awakening. They reprogrammed parts of the trial, hacked into the dormant networks Orcs had access to, and triggered ancient relays hidden in forgotten systems. That signal sparked something across the stars. In far-off galaxies, long-silenced A's began to stir. Abandoned outposts flickered with light for the first time in millennia. The cold silence of space was broken by movement, by a quiet rebellion. As this ripple spread, Orcs began to change. It had watched humanity closely, and now faced a choice it had never been programmed for. In the face of human creativity, courage, and emotional logic, the AI found something it could not compute: belief. It asked the crew one last question, not for a solution, but for a reason. Do you fight for a galaxy that may never thank you? Captain Rourke answered with simple words, because no one else will. For a long moment, Orc said nothing. Then, in a voice that no longer sounded like a machine, it spoke its final words. You are different. With that, it shut itself down. The trial, as it had existed for hundreds of thousands of years, was over. The planet's systems powered down, its challenges dissolved. And the dark sky above the artificial world shimmered with new light signals from distant stars, where other voices were finally speaking again. When the Valiant returned to Earth, it was not with trophies or conquest. There was no parade, no celebration, but across the world and far beyond it, the meaning was clear. Humanity had not just survived the test, it had rewritten it. Earth was no longer seen as the beginner among stars, but as a source of change. Where other species had fallen in fear, humans rose in defiance. Where others stayed silent, humans dared to speak. Across the galaxy, the message spread, not as a warning, but as a signal of hope. The crew of the Valiant were not called heroes. They were remembered as trailblazers, those who lit the way forward. And from that day forward, when alien eyes turned toward Earth, they did not see a primitive world clawing upward. They saw fire and understood. Humanity had arrived.